Hello everyone, welcome to Insight. This is your Psychology Hub. In this video lecture, we will be looking into the second chapter of class 11th NCERT, that is the methods of inquiry in psychology. I would like to ask you to watch the video on 1.5x if you want to save some of your time. Moving forward, most of the students feel like this is the most dull and boring chapter out of all. I would say otherwise, because once your interest in research sparks, you cannot go back. And this is the very basics of it. So pay close attention. Now, if you have not seen the previous video titled What is Psychology, I would recommend you to, because almost all the points of the first chapter in your book have been covered in that video. So let's start. Here, what we mean by psychological inquiry is nothing but how psychologists study behavior. How do we know how memory works, what intelligence is, or what part of brain controls what emotions? The answer is research, which is the systematic investigation into and the study of materials in order to establish facts and reach new conclusions. So, we will be looking into the goals of research, which is, I guess, it is the first point. So, instead of calling it psychological inquiry, I would just call it psychological research or research, right? So, like any scientific research, psychological research also has some goals. They are description, prediction, explanation, control, and application. Now, for the ease of your memory, I have prepared a mnemonics DCAP. Description, explanation, control, application, and prediction. Always use mnemonics to make things easier for you to memorize. Okay, so this is DCAP, which are the goals of psychological research. Now we'll move sequence wise. Okay, starting with description. Imagine a psychologist who wants to study how children interact on a playground. They might visit a school and quietly watch the children play without interrupting them. By observing their behavior and interactions, the psychologist can then describe how children of different ages play together, how they resolve conflicts, and how some of them tend to be more outgoing than others. Right? So the psychologist is trying to describe behaviors. So in a psychological study, we attempt to describe a behavior or a phenomenon as accurately as possible. So in order to do this, a researcher or a psychologist will also have to record particular behaviors which help in proper understanding of the behavior, right? Next is prediction, which is the second goal. So if you have understood and described the behavior accurately, then you come to know the relationship of a particular behavior with other types of behaviors, events, or phenomena. Then what we can do is we can predict or forecast that under certain conditions this particular behavior may occur, and of course with a certain margin of error, a certain chance factor, right? There is always the probability of something else that comes up. Now, you have a beautiful example here, very easy to understand. On the basis of a study, a researcher is able to establish a positive relationship. Positive relationship meaning if one variable goes up, the other variable also goes up, right? So here the researcher is finding out that if a particular student is dedicating more time to study, then their exam results will also go up. So we are talking about positive relationship. What we are doing here is we can predict that a child who devotes more time to study will get good marks, right? So prediction becomes more accurate with the increase in number of persons observed, which is why psychologists or researchers want to increase their sample size in researches. Next is explanation. Explanation, it is the third goal of psychological research. Explanation is actually the why part. So, for example, if a psychologist wants to study memory, he or she will conduct the study, let's say by showing people pictures of different animals and then asking them to remember as many as they can. They find out that people tend to remember pictures of animals they like better than the pictures of animals they do not like, such as snakes or spiders or whatever. This shows that our emotions can affect how well we remember something. So this is explaining why and how. So here, what we are trying to do basically is we are trying to know the causal factors or the determinants of behavior. Okay, we are trying to answer the question why a particular behavior is occurring or what is causing a particular behavior. Right? Moving on to the next goal, that is control. So control, we can also call it manipulation. Right? We can again go back to the first example where the psychologist was trying to study how children interact at a playground. For this, the psychologist will carefully choose specific times of the day, right, to observe children when the playground is, say, not so crowded, not so distracting, or when weather conditions are similar. This control over the environment helps ensure that the researcher observes natural behavior without other factors influencing the results. So, control includes managing and manipulating variables. So, control here refers to three things: making a particular behavior happen, that is, stimulating an event, activating an event, reducing it, or enhancing it. For example, you can allow the number of hours devoted to study to be the same. You can reduce them or you can increase the study hours. Right? The change brought about in behavior by psychological treatment, that is therapy, is also an example of control. What we are doing in therapy is we are trying to increase certain behavior, or we are trying to decrease certain behavior, or we are trying to maintain good behavior or behaviors that are helpful, right? So that is control in a way. And the final goal is application, which is to bring out positive changes in the lives of people. So it means how research findings can be applied to life. Let's again look at an example. Psychologists study how students learn best. They might find that breaking into smaller chunks or breaking information into smaller chunks, such as studying a little bit each day, every day, helps students remember more. So what will teachers do then? Teachers will apply this knowledge that they got from psychological research to design lessons in such a way that improves how students learn. Right? So they are applying the knowledge gained by research. Now, advertisers and almost all the professions use the findings to make their business grow more or make it more appealing. Right? I hope this goals of psychological research was made easy to understand by me. Do remember the mnemonics: decap, description, explanation, control, application, and prediction. Moving on to the steps of conducting a scientific research. So how do we actually conduct the research? So it is very important to understand firstly that science is not so defined by what it investigates, but how it investigates, right? So we know that science is systematic. Any scientific method is systematic. Whenever we hear the word systematic, we have to associate it with the word steps. So we know that there are going to be some steps which we have to follow, like sequence wise. So the scientific method attempts to study a particular event or phenomenon in an objective, systematic, and testable manner, that is observable manner. Okay, so here the objectivity part refers to the fact that if two or more people independently study a particular event, then both of them to a great extent should arrive at the same conclusion. Okay, so if you are taking a test, a performance test, any test, okay, and you are getting a score of say 88, but when you take another performance test, the same kind, and you get a score of say 40 or 50. There is a huge discrepancy, right? So we can say that either one of the tests is not reliable. Okay, so objectivity means if you are taking a test at two different times, then the results have to be somewhat similar. Okay, the second characteristic of scientific research is that it follows a systematic procedure. So as I said, it means it follows a step, or it follows steps of investigation. Now, it includes the following steps. You also have a diagram which makes things easier always. So the steps are conceptualizing a problem, collecting the data, drawing conclusions, and then revising the research or conclusions. Now, why are we again going back to that? Because there will always be a scope for more research, for more study, or for understanding of deeper concepts, right? Which is why we are going back to conceptualizing a problem. Or it can happen that the research that we have done, there are some experimental errors, which is why we have to go back to starting from scratch, right? Let's start with the first point, that is conceptualizing a problem. Here, the word problem doesn't only refer to issues, it can also refer to any gaps in knowledge or any correction in the current knowledge, right? So what we are doing here is that we are trying to select a topic for our study. We are trying to narrow down our options and we are choosing one topic on which we are to conduct a study. How do we know we have to conduct a study on this particular topic only? It is by the review of past research, observations, and personal experiences. The review of past research is known as ROL, review of literature. Here, the researcher goes deep into the articles, magazines, and research reports regarding that particular topic and dives deep to see if a similar research has taken place or what the researchers say about that topic, right? Observations. The researchers observe phenomenon in order to understand things better, of course, and personal experiences. The researchers are trying to add some personal experience to make it a novel research, or it is that they have experienced something different and they are trying to explore into that area, right? Now, in psychology, we study a diverse range of problems related to behavior and experiences. These problems may be related to understanding our own behavior, that why do I feel this? How do I feel and behave when I am angry or when I am in a state of joy or grief, right? How do we reflect on our own experiences and behaviors? All of this is done to understanding our own behavior. We can also conduct researches to understand how other individuals' behavior are. For example, why is someone not able to complete the puzzle or solve the puzzle when there were distractions, right? Or why do some people suffering from chronic illness not take medicines? So these are the researches we conduct to understand how and why others behave. Next is we conduct research to understand how groups influence individual behavior, right? So your behavior when you are with your friends and your behavior when you are with your family is different. It is also different when you are with different friend groups, right? So how do groups influence individual behavior? That is one thing. Next is how group behavior change with the change in types of the groups, right? For example, why does risk taking behavior increase when people are in a group, or why do people who are in a mob act so aggressively and do things that they won't do when they are alone, right? So that is to study group behavior. And the last one is to know the organizational behavior, right? It is where we study or research upon factors which are on organizational level. For example, why are some organizations more successful than others? What do employees do that makes that organization more successful? Or what does the organization do to make most out of their employees, right? So these are some areas that a psychological research might cover. So what we are doing here is we are selecting a topic on which we want to study, then we are reviewing the literature, or we are adding some personal experiences, right? Then after the identification of the problem, we are developing a tentative answer to the problem. That is, we are assuming why this thing has happened, which is what we call as a hypothesis. That is the assumption why a particular phenomenon or a behavior has taken place. To understand this easy, imagine you have two plants. You think that if you give one plant lots of water and the other plant just a little bit of water, the one with more water will grow taller. So here, your guess is called a hypothesis. Then you try it out and then you see what happens. That is the other part of research. So assumptions about or your guesses about the solution of your own problem is known as hypothesis in research. And in research, you can take more than one hypothesis as well. Okay, so for example, based on the earlier evidence of your observation, you might develop a hypothesis that greater is the amount of time spent by children in viewing violence on television, higher is the degree of aggression that is displayed by them. So in your research, you shall now try to prove whether this statement is true or not. Right? Next step is to collect data, information, right? Data collection is a very important part. Data collection and analysis and writing the report are crucial parts of your research. And you have to be very careful so that you do not make any mistakes. Otherwise, the whole point of conducting a research is in vain. So, to collect data or to gather the information about your study, what you have to do is you have to make an entire blueprint of the study. Right? What will you include in that blueprint? You will include the participants that you want in the study. For example, you are trying to conduct a study on Alzheimer's patients. So patients of Parkinson's would not be in your sample, right? You have to take the sample or participants who have Alzheimer's. Second, you will include the method of data collection. There are a lot of different methods of collecting your sample, which you are going to study later. For example, you take probability method or the non-probability method, in which also there are further bifurcations, right? So you select a method for data collection, then you select tools to be used in research. Tools such as questionnaires, which survey would you use, if you would use the interview method, or if you would use the observation method, right? Or you would experiment, right? So these are the tools that can be used in research. So while collecting the data, you have to also consider which tool you will be using in your research, and then to decide the procedure of data collection. How are you going to collect your data, right? So depending upon the nature of the study, the researcher has to decide who would be the participants. And as I said, the participants could be anyone which can give you who can give you information about the field of your study, right? They could be children, adolescents, college students, teachers, managers. They could be either divided into male or female, or they could be divided into In our case of Alzheimer's patients, they can be divided into those who have Alzheimer's and those who do not have Alzheimer's, right? So, in data collection, you are trying to make the whole blueprint of your research. Third step is to draw conclusions. Are we already drawing out conclusions? No, we are first trying to analyze the data that you have collected through statistical procedures. So, even while we are forming a hypothesis, what we do is we write it like this, that there is no statistically significant difference between the means of the two groups. So this was an example for ANOVA or t-test, right? But we are including the word statistically significant difference. So it is very important to use statistical procedures because, as we just saw, research is a scientific procedure and there is no scope for subjectivity, right? We have to make things as objective as we can. So we are now to analyze the data that we have collected. This can be achieved through a graphical representation as well, such as preparing bar graphs or pie charts or cumulative frequencies, and by the use of different statistical methods. Now, the purpose of analysis is to verify or nullify a hypothesis and then to draw conclusions based on that. What conclusions are we drawing? We are trying to see if our hypothesis or our assumption was correct or it was not. If it is not, then we can even conduct further research. If it is, then we can also try to see why, right? So there is always a scope for research. Now, the last one is revising research conclusions. The researcher may have begun the study with a hypothesis that there exists a relationship between viewing violence on television and aggression among children. He or she has to see whether the conclusions support this hypothesis or not, right? So if they do, if the hypothesis is rejected, then the theory is confirmed. And if it is not, he or she will revise or state an alternative hypothesis or theory and again test it based on new data and then draw conclusions which may be verified by future researchers, as I just explained before. So thus, research is a continuous or a never-ending process. Now we have the alternative paradigms of research. An alternative paradigm to research means what other approaches can we take than always thinking objectively or exercising control, right? So psychologists suggest that human behavior can and should be studied following the methods adopted by sciences like physics, chemistry, and biology. One key assumption of this view is that human behavior is predictable and that it is caused by internal and external forces, right? Internal forces being our emotions, feelings, core beliefs, schemas, and external forces being the environment, the people around us, the weather, right? It could be anything. And the behavior can be observed, measured, and controlled. So in order to achieve these goals, the discipline of psychology for the most part of the 20th century restricted itself to the study of overt behavior. We called this behaviorism, right? It was developed by Watson. So this part didn't focus on personal feelings, experiences, meanings, values, beliefs, perspectives, etc. But in recent years, a different method known as interpretive method has emerged. This interpretive method emphasizes understanding over explanation. We are not trying to ask the question why this has happened, why are we feeling this way. Rather, we are trying to understand it. And this interpretive method holds the view that human behavior and its study should be different from the method of investigation like the physical world, right? Like physics or chemistry or biology. Now, This viewpoint emphasizes the importance of how human beings give meanings to events and actions and then interpret them as they occur in a particular context. Let us take the experiences that may occur in some unique contexts, such as people experiencing suffering due to external factors. Right? External factors can be anything, it can be objective or subjective. Objective external factors like some natural calamities, earthquake, tsunamis, they are objective because they are experienced by everyone. And subjective experiences like experiencing grief, feeling angry, right? So this is subjective part of the experience. Now, in this subjective part of experience, to objectively measure things is not possible, nor is it desirable, right? Because everyone has their own frame of reference, their own interpretations of reality in his or her own way, based on, say, past experiences, based on contexts. Therefore, we need to understand the subjective interpretation of reality. The goal here is to explore the different aspects of human experiences and behaviors without attempting to disturb its natural flow. For example, a researcher does not know what he or she is looking for, how to look for it, and what to expect. Rather, they try to map an uncharted wilderness, and with little or no prior knowledge, they are just recording detailed descriptions of behavior, and then finding out or understanding the particular context. Right? So, these are the two basics of the research that we are talking about, which is, first is the completely objective part of it, and the second one is the interpretive method. So both scientific and interpretive traditions are considered useful in their respective areas and are concerned with studying behavior and experiences of others. And we can also ask ourselves about our own personal experiences, our own core beliefs, our own schemas, attitudes, right? Psychological research also helps understand our own self by reflecting on our own experiences, our own insights, right? So that was it for this video. If you want to access the whole chapter, do write to us at inpsytme@gmail.com. We have a 15% off till the first week of August. So hurry up and grab your course.